Welcome to part 3 of the Module 4 VM build video series. I'm going to cover building the Ubuntu Desktop VM in this video, but I wanted to close out my discussion of the Ubuntu server. As you can see, I've done nmap. As I would expect, the only thing I've got up and running is the SSH server. It really doesn't have anything to talk to right now. Because, well, I don't have any other VMs running. I've done some other things. I figured out my local, I did this with localhost. I actually put the IP address output in into a file with my input-output redirection with the one standard out redirector. Let me do this. -4 show. Okay, so if I only want to see IPv4, looks like this thing has gotten a lease of 192.168.31.131/24, which I imagine will last forever. We'll have to see if this comes down long enough, if something else picks up that IP address. Now, one thing that you're going to want to do in any real-world situation is set the address statically of any server system. It works okay for now, particularly because I don't have my Debian infrastructure server set up, providing, say, DHCP and DNS. If I wanted to have this Ubuntu platform in the same sandbox with everything else, I would definitely need to bring up my infrastructure servers first. So the last thing I'm going to do is shut this thing down, because we're dealing with the console. I have to do everything the hard way. If you're in a desktop environment, you basically just go up to that corner, choose your shutdown options, and it will invoke shutdown for you as though you were root. If you're doing this yourself, either at the console or in a virtual terminal, you have to do it this the hard way. So I'm going to do sudo shutdown now. And it's going to shut everything down. It hasn't asked me to take a snapshot because, well, I didn't configure that yet. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It's asking me, what do I do with all this other stuff? So let me edit the virtual machine settings, because it really is a good idea to set these things to snapshot. At least ask you every time. Okay, so my Ubuntu server is built and down. My memory consumption is back down to 6.8 gigabytes. I've actually got my task manager on the other screen so I can watch this. So I'm going to build my next VM. So VM, file, new virtual machine. Typical install later, Ubuntu 64-bit, yes. UB804 desk AMP. Okay, so that'll tell me what this is. Always give these things meaningful names. It's usually important to have your host name mean something, unless, of course, you've got a fun, geeky naming convention. Say you name all of your servers for Jedi, or name your servers for the actors who play the various incarnations of the Doctor, or whatnot. Anyway, so I'm a standard 20 gig build. I don't need to do anything fancy here, really. Pointed at the ISO. So desktop. Drag this over. Open. And let me see, it's NATed. It's got one processor. I don't have virtual printing enabled because I don't need it here. Now, in some virtualization systems, you may have to change which USB it handles. The other day, bringing up that Kali VM that I mentioned on my personal Fedora laptop, I had to go into VirtualBox and tell it to use USB 1.1, not USB 2.0, because it didn't want to start the VM at all using USB 2.0. And frankly, I'm probably not going to be plugging much into that system anyway, so it doesn't matter. So finish. And this is going to look different. You're going to have different choices, different look and feel. So we'll have it's still the Anaconda installer. So click in here and we wait for it. I think this thing down here, I think that's probably something to do with accessibility options. Say, for example, if you don't have a keyboard, or you need to alter your keyboard, or you need it to read the screen to you, etc. So Ubuntu is coming up. I'm going to wait just a second before I pause this. I may need to pause this and let it think for a bit, as with any other OS installation. Even instantiating or generating a VM from an existing OVA, OVF appliance, it's still going to have to think for a while. That happened to me the other day on this Debian, on building VMware inside Fedora, building Kali inside Fedora. It's not, there is no easy button here. So I'm going to pause this for just a minute because it is obviously thinking. Now, in terms of user experience, if you're in charge of user experience, UI, UI design, things like that, make sure you have a screen that tells the user in some way, shape, or form that it's doing something, even if you're doing it in a text format. And what you have is a progress bar made out of square brackets and equal signs. That's still better than the user sitting and waiting, wondering, okay, is it doing its job or has it hung up? So I'll pause this and we'll be back when I've got something to talk about. This is about 10:50 right now. I'll let you know what time it is when I start up again, so you know how much time this takes. Okay, and it's back. It only took a couple of minutes. And so our first option is to try it or install it. This indicates that this is fundamentally a live boot. You'll notice there's a couple of other things. I can see some of my information. Essentially, it logs me in as a live user. So this is the GNOME desktop. I can see. Now I can't see a lot. I can turn off my network, or I can see my live session, but I can't learn anything about it yet, so it's limited. I also don't have settings options or anything like that. So what I want to do is install it. If you want, just for giggles, to play around with the live version and then reboot and install it again. Notice I've got my keyboard choice and keyboard layout, both screens kind of compressed together. So it's Anaconda, but streamlined. And if you wanted to test your keyboard, okay, it works good. It might be a good idea to do this, particularly if you're going to choose a non-standard layout or a non-standard language. Say you want British English or Australian English or something else entirely. Okay, I probably mistyped that a little bit because I can't see what I'm typing. That's what Cherokee looks like. A man named Sequoia invented a whole new alphabet, technically a syllabary, for the Cherokee Nation. back in the 19th century, where every character stands for an entire syllable. Some languages are like that. So let me put that back the way I want and keep going. So I'm going to do my normal installation, and I'm going to download and install updates while installing Ubuntu. This is another streamlining step. And I am now this third-party software option, subject to license terms, included for documentation, some proprietary. That may be an indication that some of this is non-free, because we're dealing with Debian and Debian derivatives. They care a lot more about free versus open than some other parts of the open software community. So I'm going to go with the standards. Actually, no, I'm going to go minimal because I don't think I need. Actually, yeah, basic utilities, games. Actually, I'm going to do everything. Continue. And I'm probably going to pause. Okay, erase disk and install Ubuntu. Yes, so this is it doing all the Parkman stuff in the background. So yes, it's the same choice we would have made in the Anaconda installer, but much more of it is done for you on the back side. Now, Ubuntu will get your attention, and I'm not in Chicago, I'm in Houston. Okay, so there's more than one Houston. Houston, Texas. That Ubuntu will get your attention by playing bongos, like a sound. Let me pause this for just a second. Okay, so I've made my decisions. I've got my username set up. I've set a password. It tells me it's weak. I know that. One thing that Ubuntu will do is try to take your name and turn it into the computer name. The other fun thing Ubuntu did was it tried to say that it was name dash virtual dash machine. So Ubuntu knows that it is a virtual machine. Most modern operating systems can, to a certain extent, detect, I think, the hypervisor. There's a whole class of things that we'll discuss in the server virtualization course about VM escape. So I'm going to click continue. Notice I am not setting the root password here. With some of these builds, you don't ever set the root password. You're given root via sudo, but you don't do that. So I'm going to pause again because it's thinking. Okay, we're back. Installation has taken about 15 minutes, maybe a little less. It, strangely enough, did not give me the Ubuntu bongos to get my attention. So I will restart the system. Whereas with the Ubuntu server build, we didn't have we had to disconnect. Whereas with and press enter. Okay, I'm gonna have to do that after all. I'm glad it interrupted me. Okay, so I really didn't. And give it a few seconds, and Ubuntu will come up. Let me pause this. So Ubuntu gives you this. What's new, a window switcher, applications menu. If you want to explore it, go for it. Or you can just quit it. So you've got your software store, you've got your app grid, you've got Thunderbird, Firefox. Of course, the first thing I'm going to do is make my terminal a favorite. So it goes right there. I'm actually going to remove Thunderbird because I don't need it. Remove Rhythmbox because I don't need it. I prefer VLC. And so here's the installation menu. Now, of course, the right way to do all of this is at the command line. So groups. And as I can see, I am a member of the sudo group, so I don't have to use vi sudo or anything like that. And that's me. Okay, so I'm out of time, so next video will be Kali.